Hello and welcome to I Talk to Ghosts. I'm your haunted host, Jennifer, a professional medium and a teller of ghost stories. Dear listener, tonight I am away for Thanksgiving, so I've selected a few of my favorite ghosts to keep you company this week. Please enjoy these super spooky ghost stories, and I'll be back next week with a regular episode with more new ghost stories, an in-studio spirit reading, and a special message from the spirits as well. See you then. When I was a teenager, my friends and I decided to go downtown and explore this old, insane asylum that had been converted into a retirement home, but had since been abandoned. The building had been empty for years. We went downstairs into the basement, and we instantly got a feeling as if we were being followed. I don't think I scare easily, but I kept feeling every time we turned around to walk away that it would start following us again. So I immediately turned around and started running, hoping to run into whatever was following us. I ran down the hall and there was nothing. I decided to shrug it off, thinking the dark was getting the best of us. I met back up with my friend a few minutes later in one of the rooms that was used in the funeral home. I decided to explore and open all the doors and cabinets. They were all empty, except for the last one. Inside was a necklace. The necklace had a pendant of a large triangle. It looked carved and handmade, and almost the size of my palm. As we examined this necklace, and as soon as I picked it up, we instantly heard someone talking behind us. We turned around, honestly afraid it might be the police, but no one ever came around the corner. As we were leaving, there was still that constant feeling of being followed. At one point, the atmosphere was so heavy, my friend suggested I go and put the necklace back. So I agreed and started back down the hallway, and I placed the necklace where I found it. As soon as I put the necklace back, the door behind me slammed shut. I thought my friend was playing a joke on me. I kicked the door and tried calling his name to open it, but there was only silence. After a few moments of jiggling the door handle and pushing with all my strength, the door just suddenly popped open, and I walked out to see my friend turning the corner to come check on me. I told him what happened, and he swore it wasn't him. We left and went home. A few nights after that happened, things started happening around my house. We joked at first that there was a ghost, but then things got worse. At night, my dog would wake up and start growling and barking at my closet. The next night, as my dog slept at my side, I was playing the Xbox. I turned, thinking I heard a noise, and my dog woke up and started barking hysterically at my closet again. My roommate then walked into my room with a strange blank expression on his face. I asked him what was wrong, and he looked at the closet and pointed, then turned around and went back to his room. I immediately jumped up and walked into his room, asking him why he didn't say anything. He was in his bed, sound asleep. I walked into my room and found my jacket, which was hanging in the closet, now fallen on the floor. My dog yelped and ran out of the room. I picked up my jacket, and the necklace fell out onto the floor. I woke up my friend at that point and showed it to him. "I thought you put that back," he said. I told him I did. The whole room got really cold. We immediately left the house and stayed in a hotel for the night. The next day, I returned the necklace again from where I first found it. I'm really hoping it doesn't come back. This happened to me when I was 14. I was a Boy Scout and we were on a camping trip. We arrived when it was already dark, so we were told to go out and find some rocks to build a ring around a campfire, and that we should go in pairs. I went with a friend, each of us holding a flashlight. We were camping near a hill, so we ventured up it, looking for rocks. And suddenly, we heard someone walking in the leaves. We pointed our flashlights towards the sound and saw something I haven't been able to explain, even to this day. There was a shadow of a man with his hands on his hips. The figure was pitch black, even though we were both shining our flashlights towards it. I looked at it for a moment and got so scared that I started to run. But my friend was frozen in fear, and all he could do was yell at me, "It's only a bird, it's only a bird." I ran back to him, and he was white as a sheet. I had to grab him to make him react. We then heard someone running through the leaves. I frantically looked for the source with my flashlight, but I couldn't see anything. We both ran out of there as fast as we could. At camp, we didn't say a word, nor did we ever talk about the incident with anyone other than ourselves. I would have written this story out of my life as a nightmare and probably forgotten about it altogether because I was so young at the time. However, one day, about 2 years after the incident, my parents had some friends over for dinner. After dinner, they were sitting around telling ghost stories and talking about strange things that had happened to them in their life, when my father started to tell a story about an encounter with a shadow form. Surprisingly, it was at the same camping grounds where I had had my experience. I had never told him anything about what happened to me. I then talked to him about my experience, but we never could find a logical explanation to what had happened to both of us. Although we went camping back in that same location again, we never did have another encounter with that shadow person. For a long time, I was a book broker and collector. I guess I'm still a collector, but I don't hunt for books for other people anymore. It was in the early 80s when I had an experience with the paranormal. I was living in Bend, Oregon, and I had always wondered if the older books I found held anything unusual in them. Books are a very strange thing. People become very attached to them. I've had a few books over time that I felt had a strange aura around them. I never told anyone about that because I thought they might think I was crazy. To be honest, I wasn't sure that was even quite possible. That is, until I bought the Beasts of Tarzan book. I purchased the Tarzan book from an estate sale. I love to go to estate sales to see what rare gem I could find. Tarzan books aren't super rare, but this one was in excellent condition. It had a beautiful light green cover, and as I looked through it, I found a name and date written in pencil in the back, Benjamin, 1920. I paid for the book and left for home. When I got to my house, I put the book on my desk and forgot about it. The very next morning, I got up and headed to the kitchen to get some breakfast. When I passed my office, I noticed that the book was on the floor. In fact, it looked like it had been placed on the floor. It was open as if someone had been reading it. I found this very odd. I live alone except for my dog, and he had been with me all night. I picked the book up and looked at it. I was afraid that if it had fallen off my desk, it could have damaged the spine, as old as it was, and I breathed a sigh of relief when I realized it was okay. I shook it off and figured I had accidentally bumped it off my desk. However, over the next few weeks, I found the book 4 more times on the floor. It was always in the same spot on the floor and was always turned to the same pages. After the 4th time, I decided to put the book in my old trunk. The trunk was in the corner of my office, and it's where I kept some of my more valuable books under lock and key. It was quiet for a few days, so I forgot all about the book. Then, one evening, I was reading a book before going to bed when my dog jumped up as if he heard a noise. His hackles were raised, and he started to growl at the hallway. At first, I couldn't hear anything. Then, I heard it. It was a deep thudding. I walked down the hall and could hear the thumping was coming from my office. I opened the door and realized that the hollow thud was the sound of someone pounding on my old trunk in the corner of the room. I reached into the room to turn on the light, and suddenly the sound stopped. I walked over to the trunk, but couldn't see any signs of anyone having been there. I got the key from my desk drawer and opened it, half expecting an animal to jump out. As I opened the lid, I found nothing out of the ordinary. I closed the lid and looked around. I was stumped as to what could have caused the banging. I checked all the doors and windows and finally went back to bed. I had just gotten back to bed when I heard the banging starting up again. I ran down the hall with my dog at my heels, and as I opened the office door again, it stopped. I left the light on in the office and went back to bed. The sound didn't come back that night, but my mind was running wild, trying to figure out what was going on. Things were quiet for about a week. Then one night, I was startled out of a deep sleep when the door to my bedroom was flung open and my dog started barking at the hallway. I jumped out of bed and grabbed the phone, thinking I had an intruder. I was just about to dial 911 when I heard the distinctly familiar sound of the trunk being hammered on. That's when I knew it wasn't an intruder. I walked down the hall and, just as before, turned on the light to the office and the banging stopped. I was both terrified and stumped. I was starting to wonder what I had brought into my home to cause this. It was another week without any sound from my new ghost friend. I was just beginning to believe it may have left me alone for good but I was wrong. I had gone to bed and had fallen asleep. I remember rolling over in bed when the smell of burning wood permeated my nose. I was trying to figure out if I was awake or dreaming when a new horrible burnt smell hit me. I sat up in bed and reached for my lamp. Just before turning it on, I froze with a gasp. Standing right next to my bed was a boy, about 10 years old. He had on clothes from another era. The left side of his body was burned black. I could see one of his eyes was burned out, and there were tendrils of smoke drifting up from his smoldering clothes. I could see a few red cinders burning in his shirt. I realized the horrible burning smell was that of burning hair. I was horrified and unable to move. He looked at me with an angry, almost accusing look. He started to speak, but I couldn't hear what he was saying. He looked at me again, and with considerable effort, he spoke aloud this time. I could hear him in a soft, raspy voice. "You took my book." He leaned in closer to me and again spoke. "You took my book." It hit me like a ton of bricks. I was looking at Benjamin, the owner of the Tarzan book. And in a single moment, he vanished. The next thing I remember was waking in the morning. I was still so terrified. I got up and retrieved the book. I sat in the kitchen, shaking from my experience. I didn't know what to do, but I knew without a doubt this book wasn't going to spend one more night in my house. It happened to be Sunday morning, so I dressed and went for a drive. I felt that if I destroyed the book, Benjamin might stay at my home, and I didn't want that. So I called a friend of mine who was also a book broker. I met him that afternoon and explained what I experienced. At first, I thought he might think I was crazy, but he listened intently. He explained he had also had a similar experience once, and he had found a gentleman who collected books just like this one. He explained he thought the guy would love the Tarzan book. My friend offered to take the book with him, and I told him if he took the book, he was welcome to the entire sale of it. I handed him the book and went back home. I'm happy to say I never experienced another incident. I don't know what happened to Benjamin, how he died, or why he was so attached to that book. Not long after this, I started renting a storage unit for all my older books. I have Benjamin to thank for that. We have lived in 3 different houses, and every single one has had a spooky event to tell about it. Multiple stories, actually, including family and friends who have experienced things there as well. From the time she was little, my youngest daughter was terrified to sleep in her own room due to seeing things, such as a tall man who was even darker than the shadows. Once, she was awoken up by a lady who tried to talk to her, and the name my daughter was told turned out to be a relative who had lived in our family home 50 years prior to us. We are currently renting an old farmhouse. Before moving into this home, my youngest daughter and I were there alone. I was cleaning the upstairs in preparation for the move-in. While running the vacuum, my daughter frantically stopped me and wanted to leave. I told her we couldn't just yet, that I needed to finish. She cried and said, "But Mommy, I want to leave because the little girl is copying me, and I don't like it." I asked her, "What little girl? What are you talking about?" thinking somehow my oldest had come over with a family member and was trying to prank scare us. But my youngest said I was singing Ring Around the Rosie, and the little girl was singing with me, and I don't like how she sounds like me. I'll show you. My little one began to sing, and I listened. I didn't hear anything until the very end, with the part, "Ashes, ashes, we all fall down." No voices, but it sounded like little footsteps in the downstairs living area. It timed up perfectly as the sound of a little kid walking in a circle and falling down, as the song portrays. I was terrified. I picked up my daughter, I raced downstairs, turned off all the lights, and looked around to make sure no one was there trying to scare us. There was no one. We bolted out the door. We moved in a week later and things were fine starting off. No more strangeness. Until now. I began hearing and seeing what looked like my daughter walking from room to room. Only, it's not her. She would either be sleeping or in a different part of the house, or not home at all. I kept this to myself because I didn't want to scare my family. But a few nights ago, my oldest was upstairs in her room, and my little one was asleep in my bed. She was having a rough night, scared of something, and wanted to sleep in my room with the lights on. I had just got her to sleep when my oldest screamed and came bolting down the stairs. She was screaming and calling for her sister, who, as she could see, was asleep in my arms. My oldest was purely terrified and began crying. She explained that she was sitting at her vanity and was looking in her mirror when she heard her door slowly crack open. And there was my youngest holding the doorknob, just standing there, grinning. My oldest immediately turned from the mirror to ask her what she was doing up this late, but as she turned to look, her sister was gone. It frightened my oldest daughter so badly, and she swore on her life she had seen her sister there, and then she vanished, and that her bedroom door was left empty and open. I then confessed that I had seen this double too. I'm certain we aren't crazy, and I've had others witness things in every home we lived in. I feel my oldest is maybe sensitive to the paranormal like I am. Maybe all three of us are. Otherwise, I don't understand why these unexplainable things always happen to us. I live with my parents and younger sister. Lately, we've been having weird experiences in the house. Everything from creepy voices to shadow people to my closet door being opened on its own. My sister even once saw a small ghostly child run through her bedroom and out the window. I have been having sleep paralysis a lot. I kind of got used to all these things, and it didn't bother me much. However, there is one particular story I'd like to share that my brother and I experienced. As previously mentioned, I used to have sleep paralysis quite often. I've read about sleep paralysis, and it seems like it has nothing to do with the paranormal. True or not, every time I had nightmares during sleep paralysis, I would see a really tall shadow of a man wearing a hat. I have never seen his face, just a tall shadow with big, red, eyes. One night, my brother was staying the night at my place, in my room while I was working the night shift. I was at work, but I was really tired, so I decided on my break I would take a quick nap in my car. I had a horrible nightmare, and I woke up sweating and breathing heavily. In this nightmare, I saw me and my brother in my car, and we were bruised and bleeding from a car accident. My brother was trying to help me come to consciousness, and in my back seat was the same tall shadow looking at us and laughing. The whole thing left me very shaken. As I sat there trying to calm down, my phone binged with a text notification. It was my brother, who should have been sleeping at this hour. I responded to his greeting with, "Don't tell me you just had a nightmare." He was stunned and told me, "Don't say a word. I'm coming to your office." When we discussed what he dreamt, he described the same nightmare and the same shadow person laughing. Both of us had the same vision, and we both woke up at the same time as well. Listen to I Talk to Ghosts for an atmospheric chill and to never feel alone, knowing the spirits are always around you. The autumn months are the perfect time to share and recommend this podcast to your ghoulish friends. Thank you for supporting the podcast and sharing the spooky. And with that, dear listener, we've reached the end of this episode of I Talk to Ghosts. I hope you've enjoyed the ghost stories that I shared with you this evening. Do you have a similar experience? Of course, I would love to hear about it, so please reach out. In the meantime, wherever you wander off to in this world or the next, just remember, come back and visit with me. Have a lovely, spooky evening, and good night.